You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show. I give you a summary of my take today, and later you can read on my JoyOnline.com. And my take today, I title it soon, Ghana police will have no job if. Now, you would have followed that sometime in early 2017, I wrote condemning key NPP leaders for shamefully endorsing criminal acts of its criminal groups. I called for urgent and sustained action, but don't we seem to go to sleep too quickly when the NPP or its related and connected parties are the wrongdoers? Little may have been heard of the invisible and Delta forces in a while, but that's not because of state action. It is no secret that some of their members got the jobs they sought by their thuggery in chasing out appointees and other officers of state. That year, when an NGO got Dr. Kwesi Enin and myself to speak to the subject of vigilantism in the university in Tamale, I was forced to read a bit more on it. The NDC has just outdoored more of such criminal groups, and we have reason to revisit the matter. Like the NPP, the NDC has no shame in publicly endorsing and defending what a general secretary knows to be the hawks, dragons, and lions. He is even confident to justify their formation and condemn the NCC for decrying the conduct. In opposition, the politicians don't trust state security for protection. So, the NDC insists it won't do anything about these groups until the NPP has disbanded its own, and it has the fullest assurance the police will be consummately professional and effective in their job. Fact, and the fact is, these groups are eventually integrated into state security, and that is the promise on which they work for these political parties. I ask the question, why must a police service that is almost cowed into feeling helpless in this situation for fear of victimization by the politician who is breeding this danger to society deserve their jobs? The law establishing the police service empowers it to be the only body to register and regulate private security organizations. A legislative instrument was also passed to ensure proper regulation of private security organizations. These dangerous party groups, are they so registered as private security? Big question. And what has become of the clear sanctions in law for such an enterprise? You read the rest of my take, and I have a couple more to say, or a bit more to say, and suggestions as to how we can stop this particular situation, particularly the media and civil society, the citizens in general. We are not angry enough. The politicians will continue to take us for granted and give us a future that we cannot be sure of. That's by way of my take. You read it later on my JoyOnline.com. Thank you. Now, this morning, we once again will be joined by a group of individuals who have, excelled in their various areas of expertise to assist us to look at the issues that have been on the front pages of our minds in the course of the week. My guest this morning, Robert Ni Ade-Clegg. He's a lawyer and managing partner, Ni Ade-Clegg & Co. Ni, good morning.
Good morning, Samson. Thank you very much.
Right. Now, you may have read him. He's written profusely about the banking matters and matters beyond that, about corporate governance, as far as the laws of Ghana are concerned. And the very latest he wrote is what I described as very free legal advice that he gave to, directors and the people on these boards, free of charge, because that's looked to me very expensive advice that people would have to pay to get. And he gave it out for free. It was in the graphic and published on my Joy Online and other media as well. We'll be joined shortly by Dr. Edith Dankwa, who is the CEO, Business and Financial Times. They've been in charge of organizing the biggest economic forum in Ghana, where, you know, even leaders from across the globe have had to attend here in Ghana. Also, we'll be joined by Professor Godfrey Bokpin. He's economist and head, Department of Finance, University of Ghana. But right now, in the studio with Ni Adekleg is John Isiepe. I'm not too sure if I got this surname correct. Thank you very much. He is council member, Labour Policy International. Good morning and welcome to Newsfile.
Good morning, Samson.
Great.
And nice meeting you.
It's been a very long time. It's good to see you again.
Okay, so we will be speaking to other persons on the phone, including Dr. Vladimir Enchidanso, who is Dean Director of the Academic Affairs at the Ghana Armed Forces Command and Staff College, and Dr. Richmond Echiahini, Banking and Corporate Governance Consultant. But right now, let's hear and see the announcements that were made as we went to China to do business and the things that came out of that, among others. Let's hear that and come back to the studio.
Very, very determined on this Sino-Hydro arrangement, and we're counting on you in the way in which you worked with Bowie Dam, the high quality work, that will also be a feature of the arrangements that we're making with Sino-Hydro. And therefore Ghana too is very keen on providing as much support as possible to make the Sino-Hydro arrangement come on stream quickly. And that's why I'm saying that as president, I'm expecting that we'll have even more than before. I'm satisfied about the capacity, your capacity to do it, and we will have all the support that you need from the government of Ghana. Indeed, Ghana and China have signed a number of cooperation agreements to strengthen our relations, while an agreement for the reciprocal promotion and protection of investments is currently being negotiated. The process for its signature by both sides will be concluded soon. That will be a good thing, as it will provide a clear legal framework for doing business by Chinese companies in Ghana and vice versa. China has since 2015, the last 3 years, been Ghana's largest trading partner, with total trade amounting to some 6.7 billion United States dollars in 2017. Indeed, in 2017, the value of newly signed projects from China reached $2.9 billion, ranking Ghana 7th amongst African countries for foreign direct investment from China. I believe the increasing presence of Chinese businesses in Ghana is because Ghana is a haven of peace, security, and stability, and because she protects legitimate investments.
Thank you and welcome back. Now, clearly, you have followed the news in the course of the week. The president's telling, you know, of the fact that people's investments are safe here in Ghana, as he assures the Chinese business community. The China-Ghana relations must lead, you know, in a way that Ghana will take a certain lead role in that regard. He spoke about the fact that we are trying to replicate China's development model. What exactly is it that we are trying to replicate in Ghana? He said China doesn't support its nationals in Galamsey. Of course, he sought to get the Chinese leaders to agree that those who are in that enterprise in this country should suffer the full force of the law. Then we were told about Ghana signing 8 cooperation agreements, MOUs, for development. There is the Sinotruck $2 billion bauxite deal, which was finalized, and a lot of questions are being raised about that. The World Bank is being asked to clarify matters, whether or not this is a loan. And the World Bank says it's not sure yet, but it will give an answer sometime soon. Dr. Bawumia has had to say that the bauxite exploration deal with China won't burden the economy. He said it's a smart way of getting support for Ghana. There is Mr. Ofosu-Dorte, a lawyer who is experienced in matters of this nature, international, who says that the Chinese deal won't affect the IMF program. Is that the case? There is an assembling plant that is supposed to be set up in Ghana, got announced, and a lot more that has happened. Of course, there was the announcement of a $50 billion bond that is supposed to be issued to tackle infrastructure development or challenges in Ghana. We have had the minority had a say on it that our economy cannot support that venture. There are some who have said this is fanciful, and there's a need to be very cautious about what government is setting out to do. So those are the broader issues that we want to look at. And before I take off, I'd like to say that the multimedia family, the entire multimedia family, sympathizes with the family and the nation at large, and the world at large, in fact, particularly the family of Justice Krab, who passed. We got aware about that yesterday. That is a colossus. That is a colossus that the country has lost. So our condolences to the entire family, and of course to the country and to the world at large. Now, let me get to my guest in the studio. Maybe you want to say something briefly about Justice Krab. Did he teach you?
No, he didn't.
I saw him at the school often, but I never got the opportunity of he teaching me.
No, he didn't. He didn't teach me, and I'm sure many people will not even believe that he was 95 years old.
Right.
He lived a very, very long life.
Right.
If you look at the average age expectancy of the Ghanaian. Of course, he's improved over the years, but he is, if you like, an outlier as far as our statistics are concerned in terms of our age. And he lived a good life. I remember the other day talking to a very senior person, perhaps a year or two ago, who told me VCREC Krab, as everybody called him, was so fit that he could do yoga. He said he went to his house in his 90s, and you see him positioned on his hands, the rest of his body up, in that position for as long as a human being could keep himself.
Right.
And at that age, he couldn't believe that he could do things like that. So he was a very great guy, accomplished person, national life, Supreme Court judge, distinguished personality, electoral commission, first, as a matter of fact, and all of that. But because of my area of specialization and interest, I am particularly happy about the fact that VCREC Krab, even though many people do not recognize that fact, was actually the secretary to LCB Gawa when Professor Gawa came to Ghana to actually draft the Companies Act, which we have, Act 179. Because the Companies Act, as we still know, regulates the existence of companies in many ways, even where we have specialized acts like the Act 930, specialized deposits taking banks and specialized deposit taking institutions act, etc. That act in itself, in its section 2, actually says that the Companies Act is applicable unless, of course, there's a clash, and you lawyers call it generally a specialibus non derogant. We'll leave the Latin for another day.
Okay.
But he was appointed, LCB Gawa was an officially appointed sole commissioner for the purpose from around 1958 to 63, which was a very long time. And VCREC Krab served as his secretary because Gawa said, I don't want to impose British law on you. It's the truth that, as a matter of fact, there are certain things that we would have to borrow because the corporation as we know it, well, pardon my American education, the company as you know it, and its shares, etc., is not Afro-Asian. That even though we did some business in Africa and some business in Asia, We didn't do securities, we didn't do bonds, we didn't do shares and things like that. So those concepts necessarily must come borrowed from somewhere. And this was a gentleman who, then a young man, actually put together the local color, the mindset, how we saw things. And Gawa himself at some point realized that, oh, let's then create a bulwark against family members upon the death of a director coming and saying, hey, he was something was my uncle, so give me the things, etc. Those were things that he helped to bring.
Right.
Fine gentleman, and of all the people, ask yourself, why would Gawa, such an accomplished fellow, be comfortable with working with him and all of that? So that's my specific area of interest for him. I'm very happy with what he has left. It's sad that we don't give our corporate landscape in terms of his mindset, reasoning, and age enough mention that people go through law school, business school, etc., and do not even know that he played this kind of.
And in the area that you speak about him, it's interesting that we hardly remember or even associate him with the Law Reform Commission.
Exactly.
He's a man who has been in charge of reforming our laws so that you can read the law as an ordinary Ghanaian and appreciate it, so that all the legalese, the Latin language and all of that are stripped off. So he's a man that has been at the forefront of that. If you see what we call the Ghana law, the green books, big ones, he's the man.
You know, he had his own challenges, but I'm sure that's not the Supreme Court and all of that, and changing of the name Companies Code to Companies Act, and all of those things that we did. But
the challenges were to the effect that he has sought through that process to change aspects of the law. But of course,
he had become
that's another matter.
lawmaker.
Did you interact with Justice Crab in any way? Because it appears that almost every section of the society, he had some work to do. Codeo, as to elections, in Parliament. He's actually the guy who has been sort of fathering a lot of the things within Parliament to ensure that we have a democracy that is enviable.
Thank you very much. Because you are lawyers, you have that background regarding his prowess in bringing about some of the things we see currently in our law. As a union leader attending some programs where he had to deliver some papers and things like that.
Right.
It was a marvel listening to him. And he will barely make reference to documents. he's an establishment on his own. But when many years ago when we were young, I remember my father used to talk a lot about him. We also used to make fun of him because of the long VCRAC, and then we would make fun of it. Those days we were in primary school. And beyond that, he got lost in the system, and when there are issues from nowhere, he surfaces. And it was always great to listen to him and to read about the things that he has done for this country. It is really sad that this time his name has come with this bad news or sad news.
All right.
And we actually sympathize and mourn.
Yes, we definitely should be celebrating him because deservingly, I mean, that's the place where he belongs. Prof, what can you also say about Professor VCRAC Crab briefly?
Thank you very much. Good morning. And then good morning to your cherished listeners. I heard some of you saying that you did law, but you never had opportunity of being taught by him.
Yes.
Some of us never had opportunity of doing law even in the first place, let alone and all of that. So to be very honest with you, I never had any serious encounter with him. Okay. But I remember when I was in level 300 in 2001, 2002 academic year, we were taught by Mr. A. Sankuma, company law, and he mentioned his name, associated with the Gowers report.
Right.
So, but of course, what also got our attention was the name. Yeah. And he actually took time to pronounce the all of that. So once in a while, we heard about him. Somebody actually gave me a book written about him to me and asked me to read it. I've started, but I haven't made a lot of progress. But I think that...
Is it unfinished business or something?
The unfinished journey.
Journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so, but I think that gathering from social media, from the presidency and all of that, I gather that he's somebody we are proud of.
Right.
He's somebody we can all learn from. I mean, and to me, at the age that he left, I think he has done quite well.
Yeah.
A life well lived. He hasn't been associated with some corruption as perhaps it is with some people. And therefore, I think that he's somebody the youth can learn from. And we have to find a way, either there will be regular lectures in his honor, so that all that he represents and all that he has done will not be lost on us, especially the youth.
Right. The president, the vice president, almost everybody are eulogizing him. He died 94, and that is a lot to be thankful to God for. That's Justice Vincent Cyril Richard Arthur Crabbe. A few times that I had the rare privilege of being with him privately, I could tell that I had missed quite a big deal not having him teach me in law school, even though I saw him around the place all the time. Okay, so once again, our condolences to the family and to the entire country and the world that has lost a big man. All right, now let's come to the matters that we have tabled for discussion this morning. And Doc, Prof, starting with you, the president's trip to China brought a lot of news about the 8, MOUs and several other things that I have mentioned, quite a number. And of course, the announcement that we heard, I understand, is solely an idea. It's not being crystallized, but it's worth discussing, isn't it? Yeah. That's why it's being discussed, about the 50 billion century bond. Okay. Where do you start?
Okay, thank you very much. I will look at it this way, give a little background. So Africa broadly, and Ghana for that matter, the need to attract foreign direct investment is very obvious. And for Ghana specifically, there's a need to complement internally generated funds with external funds, right, foreign direct investment and all of that. So when you look at the infrastructure deficit that we are saddled with as a country, vis-a-vis the limited fiscal space, in other words, the space left for government to take on additional loans, pure debt, is very, very limited. The huge infrastructure deficit further imposes restriction on the growth drivers of the economy. It's not only Ghana, but the point is that traditionally, in fact, one basic function of the state is to collect taxes. You're able to do so much if you're able to collect a lot of taxes. But we haven't done quite well in terms of collecting taxes. It's cheap because you collect it yourself, but it's limited to how much you're able to collect. And yet you have developmental challenges. So we have relied on overseas development assistance, ODA, largely. That hasn't been forthcoming recently. Its volatility is quite obvious. We have sought to complement that through Eurobonds from the international capital market. But then we have also seen our debt to GDP ratio building up quite rapidly after we completed the HIPIC initiative in 2004 and then the multilateral debt relief initiative in 2006. So now the question is, given the infrastructure deficit and the limited borrowing space that we have, what do we do? So the traditional development partners, bilateral, multilateral, haven't been quite forthcoming, either from the US or from the European Commission or so. So Africa itself has realized that China is perhaps a better alternative now to financing our infrastructure deficit largely. But of course, you also look at it from China's point of view, and you realize that they also need Africa as much as we also need them. They need Africa for their growing economies in terms of fueling their economic drive, bauxite, oil, gold, all of that. So, and then Africa has got natural resources. It needs development. So China also needs those natural resources. So we have found a way to actually engage. But the concern has been that perhaps are we able to negotiate from position of strength? Do we have a strategy? So far, I've only seen Ethiopia and then South Africa with a strategy when it comes to relating to China. I haven't seen anything from Ghana in terms of...
Because we don't have one, do we?
I don't think so. Perhaps maybe I haven't seen, so I want to give them the benefit of the doubt in terms of a comprehensive framework that actually underpins our engagement with China. So for instance, we are told that trade volume between Ghana and China hits $6.7 billion US dollars.
Right.
Largely import. In terms of export, we are doing less than 2 billion. You know what that means? The more we import from China, the more we are exporting jobs to China and importing unemployment to Ghana. Of course, we have to look at the relationship. So the fact that it's hitting 6-point-something billion, we are interested in the dynamics. But then also you are looking at the fact that with a huge infrastructure deficit, and the fact that, you know, if you look at the real effect of the infrastructure deficit on our growth is quite enormous. In terms of infrastructure, even when you look at it in terms of economic infrastructure or social infrastructure, that is quite, but at what cost are we having this engagement? What are the terms? Are we able to negotiate from position of strength and all of that? Do we have alternatives? Beyond that, we are also mindful of the harmful effect of Chinese activities, not only in Ghana, on the entire African continent as a whole. In fact, as we speak, studies have documented that there are over 1 million Chinese on the face of the African continent right now. In terms of their respect for labor rights and environmental issues, we are concerned. Others are also concerned about the kind of investment China is doing in Africa. Could it be a new form of colonization? In the development literature, others have suggested that any continent or country that developed in this world at some point in time used Africa as a stepping stone. And perhaps this is the turn of the Chinese. I'm not too sure about that. But of course, others have suggested that Africa should come together and have a common strategy of how it engages China going forward. So the activities in terms of when you talk about construction financing, and the interesting thing is that you see sometimes we get some of these deals like the cooperation agreement that we have signed and all of that, but the real effect of that we need to take time to analyze. Sometimes we get these facilities, the companies doing the construction are Chinese companies. At the end of the day, the bulk of the money gets back to the same country in terms of, and some are also packaged, apart from the state-sponsored activities and all of that, there are private Chinese firms who are virtually everywhere. I'm told some are even selling kele-wele in this country and all of that. So,
in respect of the bauxite deal, what we hear is that the bauxite is supposed to be mined, refined, sold, and then the money put into the debt servicing. So
escrow accounts, yes, sort of.
To service, so, I don't know if the government agrees with me saying debt servicing because it's a strange, arrangement. But I think maybe what Dr. Bamia says is a smart approach. Let's wait and hear what the IMF will say, whether it's a debt or
it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing. Perhaps they are calling it. You see, the concern is that after 2006, our debt to GDP ratio came to less than 30%. We have borrowed quite rapidly, as though we could borrow our way through our problems. But that hasn't happened. So we are talking about debt to GDP ratio that they don't want it to exceed 70%, also because of certain indicative targets within the IMF program.
Right.
I'm sure it's the reason why government is looking at ways of addressing this without necessarily classifying it as part of our
program. And you talk about indicative
targets.
Yes, there's a certain threshold we cannot go beyond.
Yes, we cannot go beyond. Yes.
Okay. And that's what we are trying to circumvent.
To work towards, so that it doesn't become like non-performance to the extent of the review, because they will soon be coming.
Right.
And all of that. So we want to package ourselves in such a way that the headmaster will say that you have passed, and then we'll get the next tranche of the distance. Because at the end of the day, I gather that government intends to complete the program by the end of this year. Of course, in terms of the review cycle, it will end somewhere next year. So those are the issues. So for that reason, they are treating this strictly as a form of barter. In other words, we are giving you refined bauxite in exchange for infrastructure. But really, the underlying issue would also, so if you look at the Memorandum of Understanding, okay, passed in 2015, which I'm told hasn't changed, it's very difficult, and understand the difficulty with the IMF in terms of how to classify this. It requires some legal interpretation also. Thankfully, we have lawyers here today, so I'm also here to learn. So it's not that clear within that Memorandum of Understanding. But if you look at it within the context of our financial management arrangement in this country, then there is a strong leaning towards what the opposition is saying. So we cannot discount entirely what the opposition is saying, but of course you can also understand certain aspect of the agreement that suggests better arrangement also. So perhaps, maybe now that we have all deferred to the IMF, perhaps we'll wait for
the position suggests that, I mean, it cannot be better when you are paying certain fees,
interest,
and then you have
on
interest payments to
that.
do. It cannot be better.
So
is that a good way to look at it?
No, I wouldn't probably look at it more from that angle, because in order to perfect the value of the facility against what you are going to pay, you need to also factor the interest on that particular facility to the end, up to the maturity. Then you'll be able to perfect its value, and then you know exactly how much you are also going to pay over the period. Without that, it's going to be very difficult. You are likely to run into a mismatch, and sometimes if you don't do that costing very well, they are likely to even cheat you. But then when you look at the fact that the revenue stream from there, and the fact that it belongs to the state, and the fact that if something happens, it's more or less like the state backstops it to some extent, then perhaps you are looking at maybe, apart from the form, how about the substance of it and all of that. So those are the issues that I want to believe that we are looking at.
So
but
the Chinese definitely have a plan. They have a master plan, what they are doing. When the President Jinping says that China-Ghana relations must take the lead in Africa, it is not something he's saying out of the blue. They have a certain plan.
They have a framework.
Do we have an idea what it is that they are looking for?
You know what? It's also about supremacy.
Okay.
And all of that. China is using their financial resources to win the love of the rest of the world, especially Africa, because we need money. Look, if you look at from 2005 to 2016, the total Eurobonds that African governments have taken from the international capital market alone is more than 25 billion at very higher cost. The African premium to date, the excess interest that African leaders have to pay by accessing capital from the international capital market is more than $2.5 billion. So if there is alternative in getting cheaper facility as compared to the international capital market, I'm sure they would want to do it. And you see, the idea is that China has also found Africa as a very important vehicle for lubricating their economy, and which they are doing. And whatever statement they make is born out of a framework. They know exactly what they are doing, but oftentimes we can't trust them beyond a certain level. And that is why it's important that we understand and have a clear strategy in how we relate with China, like other countries have done.
Okay. Now, the cooperation agreements that we have had to sign with them, we understand that these are One Belt, One Road Memorandum of Understanding, Memorandum on Regional Aviation Cooperation, Agreement for Cooperation in the Peaceful Use of Nuclear Energy, Cooperation to carry out maternal and child health projects, Framework Agreement on Financing Insurance Cooperation. There's the Economic Cooperation on Phase 2 projects of the University of Health and Allied Sciences, cooperation on the expansion of the Cape Coast Stadium, and cooperation on the supply of police vehicles to the Ghana Police Service. some have asked questions, for example, that, I mean, we're going to get Chinese supplying our police service vehicles. Do you have any concerns about that also? And what do you also think about the prospect of the business that is being clinched for, you know, an assembling plant to be set up here in Ghana?
Yes,
quickly.
My initial thoughts about it was that in terms of the assembly plant, that is very good. But my concern is that along this cooperation agreement that we have signed, what's the level of local content in it?
Level of local content
in it, I'm concerned.
That's how many indigenous Ghanaians will participate or be as workers?
As workers.
Okay.
And then what wage would they command? How many Ghanaian construction firms can participate in all these agreements?
Okay.
And then
you're dealing with the aspect that will concern his interest a lot.
Okay. So, but we don't have a lot of details about all these things.
Right.
So as an academic, we are very mindful
before
we make comment that will be difficult to swallow when the evidence is available. So my understanding is that it's early days yet. So we made some calls to the ministry trying to find out, but we haven't received any document.
What about the idea of the 50 billion century bond?
Okay, so first of all, by the time we finish paying, all of us will be gone. All of us will be gone. But it's very interesting. It's very interesting. It's early days yet, so we are unable to evaluate this particular instrument effectively. The concerns will be the pricing and whether the rate will be variable. And then also, and I read about somebody talking about we not having a development plan necessarily for it. I think this is something that we have to take into consideration. In the standard finance literature, investment decision precedes financing decision. Before you take time to arrange for finance, you should know exactly where you are going to invest. You would have done your analysis. Even if you are going to do social infrastructure, you need to do the costing and all of that. Then you can perfect the financing arrangement and all of that. I want to believe that it's an idea they are putting forward that perhaps maybe to test the market that is going to be developed and all of that. So when it's done, I want to believe that all the risk and all those issues will be, from where I sit, and I want to tell you that my humble position is that there is no way this country can do without borrowing. As we speak, every cedi tax revenue that we generate, more than 40 pesos of that goes to debt servicing. So when you add debt servicing to wages, salaries, gratuities, and all of that, it takes almost 90% of what we are able to generate by way of tax revenue. So currently, my understanding is that even when it comes to statutory transfers and all that, Ghana government has to do some borrowing. But here we have a huge infrastructure deficit. Look, if you look at allocation to capital spending in the 2018 budget, it's much smaller than how much we set aside to service our debt. A country that is not making sufficient allocation towards capital expenditure is either not prepared to take advantage of the future or it doesn't have it in the first place. We are running down our asset that we may not be able to maintain. We are also unable to expand the asset base of the economy to enhance the cash flow generation capacity of the economy. So if any government came to you and told you that they will not borrow, then I don't think they are serious. Given the binding constraint in terms of the level of rigidity in our budget, we certainly have to borrow. But the question is, at what cost? And what would we use the funds for? So my concern will be more in terms of whether we have identified projects, even if they are economic infrastructure, whether we've done the cost-benefit analysis, the cash flow projections, that this infrastructure will be able to pay for it. Because at the end of the day, it's not a gift. It has to be paid in one way or the other.
Okay. There's some explanation I'm getting that the fees and interests associated that have become an issue for the minority in particular are fees and interests of Sinohydro and not of the government of Ghana. So in that regard, they have a misapprehension. They don't seem to understand the barter agreement that is being dealt with.
No, so look at it this way. So somebody is going to take the loan. Okay, all those costs ultimately must be paid for. They are not NGOs. I hope that's okay. So we can't say the minority totally is ignorant about it. It has to be paid for. All those calls, all those we have to. So we have to be able to know all of that.
Let's hear Nia de Klerk on what it is that tickles his attention, and gets him thinking about our trip to China. And we spoke about VC RAC crap a while ago. Gabia Sorochirdako says that VC RAC crap was the epitome of punctuality. Okay, you can guarantee that. He was never late, so much so that aged 95, one could even say that he was but only once late into his own funeral. All right, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so Samson, China is not a new destination. That is the first thing that I think that we should all have at the back of our minds.
The president acknowledged that,
Right.
that they had become our major trading, partner, so to speak.
It's not a new destination. And Ghana-China relations formally, of course, go as far back as 1960.
Okay.
Upon the attainment of our Republican status in July. Again, and even before that, you remember that through the Chairman Mao Nkrumah political sort of arrangement and understanding, where Kwame Nkrumah had his own frontline mindset about our position. There were 3 visits in the early 60s to China by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. There was a time when the Chinese premier in 1964 came to Ghana, that long ago. Truth is, in 1971, we all remember that there was an issue at the United Nations about the Chinese seat. And some African countries were at the front line of arguing of full powers, recognition be granted China. And Ghana played a lead role, even in those days, for China's restoration. So that 8 years ago, when we celebrated 50 years of that relationship between these two nations, the Chinese speech actually captured some sort of a gratitude to Ghana for that doing. This was an era where politics and international relations trumped international economic relations.
Okay.
We have moved beyond that era to a moment where everybody's looking at development. And China, over the years, has been able to shoot itself to become the world's second or third economy, as they call it. So the relationship has moved away from handshakes to one where there could be benefits. And our own movement has moved away from strong leaders who made big speeches and got the world's attention to what do you have and how can it attract the rest of the world to you for your gain and your benefit. So the dynamics have changed over time. It's important to see that if we were having this discussion and there was Newsfile in 1974, I can assure you that we'll be talking about the revolution somewhere. We'll be talking about putting the masses to work. We'll be talking about how they get transported. We're talking about how to develop the nation, how to build X or Y or Z. All of a sudden, the discussion now is about what do we get? What is the meaning of this? What is the bond doing? In fact, there were no bond talk back then. As far back as 2010, Mexico did a century bond, right? Just last year, Argentina, despite its previous defaults, did a century bond. The Financial Times did a brilliant article on it as to why there were investors to begin with. So that is the language of international relations these days. Once upon a time, we're looking at the relative strengths. Today, we don't have much of a strength as a country, standing next to China because of where it stands. In fact, if you read a lot of the literature on international economic relations these days, we're talking about the frustration that China brings even to the United States and its currency, the US dollar, which also causes some sort of federal percentage fixing and affects all of us, and our CD is now 5 point something and all of that. There's some sort of leeway analysis in there and all. So how then do we deal with China? Because the Chinese, whether we like it or not, are involved in some projects even in the West. Solar talk in Germany, there's China. Then nuclear plant building in the UK of all places, there is China. And yet the Chinese does not necessarily represent those Western principles and ideals. And if you sat at the feet of the political science lecturers in my day, not too long ago though, but around the late 90s, Bafwatha and co. I remember that the Chinese model and the possibility of its replication was a major topic at that time. Because in the late 90s, China was already beginning to emerge by force of its population size, which is not easily replicated by anybody else, perhaps apart from India and co, who themselves have some sort of influence, British, similar to ours, that did not lend them to the Chinese model. There was also the question about the restoration and preservation of an acceptance of the people of a certain direction and order and control coming from the center of control, based on all the issues that had happened in the past. And in fact, Ghana was praised at some point in time, Tiananmen Square demonstrations, and we supported it. They gave us some plaudits for it in 91 and all of those, because of the centrality. And of course, President Rawlings had that kind of centrality, position and role and all of that. Those were the things that they stood for. So when the president, for example, made that speech recently, in fact, I have the exact words. Maybe I should read the exact words with your kind permission.
Go ahead.
Made reference to this.
Go ahead. Yeah.
One,
yeah.
There were questions as to the direction that we are taking under President Akufo-Addo and how we see these things. Quote, his exact words. We are witnessing today how China's aggressive development of the market economy on the wheels of industrialization in this new era of socialism with Chinese characteristics has lifted some 500 million people out of poverty, creating the world's largest middle class in the process. So he talks about a new era of socialism. He raised some antennae. The issue is that there's always been a discussion that President Akufo-Addo, through one district, one factory, state-centered, recently through a government policy to deal with the banking collapse, despite all the available options through the nationalization of 5 state-controlled banking, through the free senior high school without reference to means testing, but generally because there's a state that should be able to provide for something, even though he makes all those tens of thousands of Ghana cedis every month, equal to me, who hardly has anything to but lives by the grace of God, that we should all get that same thing. There's a question about in a society where it's the state's duty, even if I don't have money. There's a certain leaning to a belief that of socialism, which is not an insult. You know, in Ghana, people think it's capitalist, it's socialist, and then it's no, which is not. It's just
so, but you would agree that they will
viewpoint.
Government will object to your use of nationalization of, in this
in inverted
circumstances.
comments.
Yeah.
In inverted comments.
Because they will say
in inverted
that's
comments.
not what they are doing.
You know, in inverted comments. But let me tell you that whether you object or not, the truth is, when you look at our laws, banking laws, regulation, etc., sanctions for playing with depositors' monies, etc., and all of that, and I know we'll come to that later on, so I don't want to overdwell on it.
Right.
Removing directors, changing all of them, changing personnel, etc., and all. If you're on the ball and doing your work, there are so many things you can do to these institutions without the state taking control of it.
Right.
So somebody can say, I despise a certain word, or I don't despise it. Truth is, it's an option whether we want the state to do this or that we want the private sector to do it.
Okay,
so the totality of those occurrences is what I'm talking about.
Right.
But the president quite clearly wants to move Ghana ahead of where it stood at the time when he assumed office. So that when he leaves, we can all have things to point at and say, Ronaldo did X or Y or Z. I think that in his wisdom, he sees that China is the hotspot today. It's the place to go to. It's the place where probably you will get some money. But of course, many people remember that from our CBD loan experience to everything else, that this is the money is not easy. So perhaps that's the idea behind the wisdom of the barter. But plain ordinary meaning, barter, does not involve money, ordinarily. It doesn't. And so I give you something, you give me something back. We have a situation where we are giving what? The projects, and then we do the bauxite thing, and it's gone. We are doing some bit of guesswork at this time. And what do I mean by that? Because we will all in this country, including the rest of us sitting here, dealing with some agreements, particularly on this 2 billion bauxite thing that we've not seen. The first rule of your training was not to comment on documentation you have not seen. So my question is, we have a certain love, a certain penchant in this country for making analysis on matters that we do not know about. And it is symptomatic of a closed society. In some places, there's no difficulty whatsoever in putting something perhaps on the website of Parliament, since a minority has an opinion on it, they are giving an opinion based on something they have seen and saying that is it a battle or a loan? And then IMF says we have forwarded it to where? Our legal department. What does that tell you? To take a look at it and to make a determination. But you are a lawyer. You haven't seen the document, but you have an opinion on it. And you've asked of me a question and an opinion on something that I have not seen. It's a problem, and I'm raising these things. This is not traditional analysis of the Ghanaian situation, but so that we begin to open our eyes to the fact that, look, the best service we give to our nation is service based on the issues and the facts.
Yeah, but are you suggesting
Yes.
that it is wrong, and I think it's not exactly wrong, that the government decides to float an issue. Sometimes they want to test what the public opinion is about it, and they give you some bit of information. Of course, we are in a situation where we don't have right to information law properly done for us to be able to access all of the information that we need to help us do some of the discussions that we have to do. But for as long as the taxpayer is involved, for as long as you're representing the Ghanaian and doing business on their behalf, and you give them an indication of what you intend to do, they have a right to run some commentary. So if the commentary is guided, if the commentary is measured, then you would not say that is wrong to do.
I'm not suggesting for a moment that we should all keep quiet.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that we are better served by having the information.
Right.
I want us to separate that, because I am such a strong believer in freedom of expression that I won't for a moment suggest that we should not comment on a matter.
Okay.
But I am saying that we are better served as a nation when that commentary is based on the facts.
That's right.
Do you think, for example, that an institution should have precedence over the nation and its citizens in terms of access to a document that affects our future? That's my question. That between me and the IMF, that I have more rights to the document, the provisions, sections, etc. in that document than the IMF should. And that the IMF as an entity of which I am a member and all of that can also see it, but not ahead of me.
Okay.
Or at least we should have some pari passu interests. You see what I mean?
Right.
So that's all I'm saying. So a lot of the analysis on the nitty-gritty, I mean, something, let's face it, you just mentioned an issue that your information reaching you suggests that there is X and Y and all of that. That's information reaching you. How do we verify it? And in your experience, both as a journalist and as a lawyer, you would agree with me that you will see the wording of just one clause in that agreement, which will mean something different from the report you got.
Yeah, right.
Simply because of the use of a single word. So I am insisting that it is important that we begin to operate an open society, irrespective of the government in power, irrespective of the issues,
right,
so that we have very, reason.
I'm asking what you make of the caution.
Right.
Plenty of it that is being thrown out there by various experts, including people who have expertise in China, business relationships. But when I make the example that this information is reaching me, you know this too well. Certainly, what I'm referring to is coming from official sources.
That's my point.
But the manner in which it is brought to my attention means that I don't need to share with you to that extent that this is from this particular source.
I'm not mentioning the source. I'm mentioning the content.
Now the president said that, the decision that we have taken is to walk hand in hand with China and her business community because we desire to walk far.
Right.
What do you make of the cautions that have come so far?
I think that the cautions are very sensible. I've read Bright Simmons on this.
Yeah.
I'm not in the position to entirely agree or disagree with him, but I think that he throws good, useful light on some of the financial implications and considerations that we must make. For example, he says that if some of the projections being made are true, it will place Ghana as the world's largest deposit holder of all bauxite. That will be, if true, it puts us in a special position. But then what is the basis of the claim? I'm told that the last time we did some assessment of some of these things, we can talk about Ini and the reserves and etc. and all that is scattered in different places. was some 70s or 1980s. That's not to say it's not good. But what I'm saying is that the world of technology is running so quickly these days that in 2018, perhaps we need to look at certain things clearly. Again, we would look at the process, the processing it to a certain level, the export and all of that, the refining of it. How many years are we looking at and all? So the president says that we'll walk far, which is your question. We'll hand in hand with China. All right, my point is, we have had relations with China, as I said, for such a long time, uninterrupted, that I don't have a problem with us dealing with them as long as our eyes are open. Because we cannot ouster our relationship with the rest of the world by dealing with China only. Because China is in this for its own interest. And what is the nature of our interest as a country? So, Mr. President, I see that you mean well. But the thing is that in the traditional literature, FDI, foreign direct investment, I've done some review of FDI recently, just about 2 or 3 months ago, on the analytical basis. And there was a struggle by a group of researchers to find any economy in the world that had been transformed. I'm not talking about sustained. Transformed by the fruits only of FDI. It was difficult to see FDI, FDI, without local participation, ownership, and control of certain things.
Okay.
So if China, and China is not saying that I'm coming to partner you per se, that we are going to do holderships of 50 this, that, and that. We don't have those details. All we know is that China has been in Africa for some time. China is dealing with all the states of Africa already. We have seen Uhuru Kenyatta shaking hands, Paul Kagame shaking hands, Nana Ghana-Akufo-Addo shaking hands. Everybody is involved in this. And the Chinese bloc is of interest to them. My point is, FDI is a great thing. But if FDI means that I come and set up in your country, and then exchange control regulations change sometime 2006 and all of that, flight of your capital movement out is allowed and open as long as you are able to meet your obligations, legal, fees, payment, taxes, as and when they arise. And we do not ensure that there is local championship created. There is local industrial hold created. It is just a question of stepping in and dealing with resources which are finite. Don't forget. Finite resources. At the end of a certain period, if you don't take hold of it, if you don't capture the handling by Ghanaians and etc. Like the Nigerians have a conscious effort to do that all the time. Whether in the banking sector, and they've even reached into Ghana, whether in their oil sector and all of that, construction and etc. There's strong local ownership and holdership.
Okay.
But do we see that here? So we must be careful. You know, there must be a conscious effort to say we are breaking the old mold.
All right.
So and until we do that, words don't assure me entirely.
Right. So Nihi comes to that point where, as Professor Bokping also said, the need to be cautious. There are some, you know, John, there are some who say that, look, we seem to be getting into a situation of selling our birthright for some small pottage. And from the angle that he even took it, when you have the benefit of Bryce Simmons' analysis as to if this is what is involved, then practically we certainly must have so much of bauxite that we can leverage and make perhaps more than what is being offered us.
Yeah.
He speaks about if you don't create local champions in the process, then we'll be doing the old things that has left us where we are in the mining of our gold. There are those who bring in the argument also, for example, that engineers and planners, they had gone to the Yinahini area and sunk millions of dollars into doing something with the prospects of employing tens of thousands of Ghanaians. Now, is all of that still available as we begin to say this is for Chinese?
Thank you very much. I've taken in a lot, and as the discussion was going on, I realized it was going to be difficult for me. Where do I start? There's so much, but I think we all agreed on one thing, that if we don't have the source document, it's difficult to delve into the issues dispassionately. Clearly, I will associate myself with most of the comments that have been made here. But some of the issues or the fundamental ones are that from what position is Ghana engaging China? The intention and the approach is made, and from within our own country there is opposition. And there are doubts. Is it because we should have done something properly to prepare ourselves and move as one people into that engagement? It is, we are becoming fed up with the kind of situation where ideas are brought up, projects are, we are trying to go into some projects, and amongst ourselves we'll be fighting. The strength to engage is not there. China will realize that we are divided. I recall that the Senchi, the Economic Forum,
the Senchi Consensus.
Yes. It brought together all the stakeholders, key persons, and certain decisions were taken. We may disagree. I had my own reservations about some of the things. But at least the effort was made. What stopped us from having some internal consensus before engaging in these things? Because, you see, we are not doing it for party. We are doing it for Ghana. We have a party in government. Once there's a government, we support the government. Supporting government means when you are going wrong, we raise it. Yeah. When you are doing well, we support.
You are not suggesting we should be applauding efforts. No. That we made efforts and brought people together at Senchi, and in the end, what was the result? What did we do with the outcome of Senchi?
Yeah. So it means that if that did not work out the way it was expected, we improve upon it. You see, when government is in power, it behoves on government to bring the stakeholders together and carry everybody along.
What are you suggesting presently?
At this stage, was there a certain consensus in our approach to engaging the Chinese? Because if there was some consensus, the reservations that started coming from minority and other experts in the field would not have come across the way.
But that's not the process. Government does not set out to deal with parliamentarians to agree on an approach to how it is going to carry on business. The executive will go, find what they deem fit, the purpose for which they have been voted into power, and then if there are any documents for the purposes of Parliament's attention, then they will take it to Parliament to shape it.
See, Samson, consultation doesn't mean you are abdicating your role as a leader. It's always good to consult, even if it will be done in private. At least we need to build that culture. For instance, we are told that perhaps there is no plan. And indeed, all of us are beginning to buy into the idea that there's no plan. So what has the National Development Planning Commission been doing all this while? With all the resources and pay and everything. What have we been doing? If indeed there is no plan, then we need to disband some institutions.
Okay.
Now, in going into this agreement, let's also look at the international dimension.
Okay. So
we have a trade war.
Okay, just hold on. And don't forget that point. Okay. You develop it further. But joining us on the line, and thankfully, Dr. Vladimir Ntwi Danso. Thank you very much for joining us, Doc.
You're very welcome.
Right. Okay, so without, pinning you down on any specific as to our visit to China and what the outcome has been, what would you say? What is your biggest takeaway from the visit to China and the news that's come out of it?
Well, the point is this, that China is reaching out to the world in all kinds of directions. And it's doing so because our relationship with our traditional partners hasn't yielded the necessary fruits. We are in that debt trap because whatever programs they give us in order to retool our economies have not given us that direction. And so beginning from 1979, when China started opening up, we were trying to reach out to the world and see how whatever assistance is given turns into development. It came to head where Africa was concerned in 2005, when 35 African countries were the focus for the FOCAC, that's the Forum for China-Africa Conference. And since then, it has been the policy of China to be able to reach out to Africa. I think my take on this is that it is the reception which matters. We did some work on Angola. I've been there about 3 times, and I'm not very happy about what I see in Angola. That the Chinese have taken over the economy, and they are very reckless. No, I just didn't like what is happening in Angola. Angolans don't own the economy. And so my take on this is that if we go into China, fine, but I would like us to bring China, not go to China. That is to say, offshore manufacturing is now the order of the day. And so if it's a shoe factory and China produces shoes and we go there to bring shoes, we should rather benefit from bringing the shoe factory here and collaborating with the Chinese in giving us those kind of employment and facilities. But my second take is this, that yes, we are signing all these agreements with them, and we should be very careful as to how we monitor what agreements we have ever signed with the Chinese. You give them 1 inch and they take a yard. And I believe that our institutions of state must avoid that kind of corruption and things like that and make sure that Ghana benefits from our relationship with China. You know, the Chinese have it and they need it. We have a billion market, 1 billion people market. They are about 1.8 billion. India is about 1 billion. So Africa is a huge place, both for a market and for investment.
Okay.
Let us use our investment properly, investment opportunities properly with the Chinese. And I believe that what we have signed, what I'm hearing, it makes a lot of sense. That the bauxite, for example, is not going to be exploited by the Chinese per se directly,
right.
And that we are going to do the exploitation with our
a Ghana bauxite
used in pay
entity. Yeah,
that's the fair thing. Rather than the Chinese are trying to avoid everything being denominated in the dollar, and affecting the global economy in the sense that when the dollar wants to pin you down, they pin you down. They want to avoid that, and that is why they are going in for all kinds of agreements that avoids dollar-denominated kind of relationship.
Okay. So that your caution, and when you mentioned that we shouldn't be going to China, but we should be bringing China in here, my guests in the studio were all nodding very actively. In response. What is it that we have that can give us the position of strength to be able to deal with them in that manner? Because the fear is that we practically are there begging. So what is it? We don't have a position of strength, so to speak.
I am always advocating, been writing, been talking about a situation where, offshore manufacturing has become the order of the day these days. And so, Martel is the largest toy-making factory in the world, in the U.S. Eventually, when they saw that the Chinese manufacturing was overtaking them in the U.S., that people love Chinese toys more than the American toys, what they did was to merge or to try to bring the Chinese in. The Chinese didn't want it because they also didn't like the American kind of conditions.
Okay.
So Mattel closed down and is producing now from China, and still called the Mattel, and then it's part of the export of China. And many countries, especially in Latin America, are trying to emulate that example where if they have anything good that can be produced in China, let's go there and produce it. But most importantly, they want Chinese companies to team up with their companies. Let us assume that there was a time the Chinese wanted to bring in their trucks and cars and whatnot. So the Ghana government perhaps should be able to entice the Chinese to team up with Kantanka, for example, and produce a certain type of car which has Chinese base.
Okay.
That is manufacturing offshore, outside China. Again, there are several things we go. our compatriots from Ghana, traders, go directly to China. Go to the Chinese embassy every morning at dawn and see how many people have queued over there going to China. And it's foreign exchange they are using. Mark you, it is going out of Ghana. Can we entice Chinese to come and manufacture those things that we are so much interested in, which has market over here? And eventually they take over the sub-regional market. So Ghana government officials and negotiators should always be able to negotiate a situation where there is a win-win. And that's all China wants. Anything that will get them also to win from our side. But if you open up too much, they win from you. Look at the Galamsey, for example. Are you sure our officials didn't know that the concessions they were giving to the Chinese and inspectors or whatever, institutional regulatory organizations were not aware that Chinese were building bridges over our waters and mining right in the belly of our rivers? Once you allow that, there are Ghanaian officials who should have stopped. They didn't stop it.
Right.
And the Chinese will exploit. And that's what they are doing in Angola and several other places. That's what I'm saying. We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
All right.
We have all the writings. Several people have written on China. I have written. Dr. QC.
Okay.
They've written about Chinese investment and whatnot and whatnot. And look, there is big money. So if you allow your corrupt officials to allow the Chinese to do what they want to do, they would do that. Because mark you, the almost 2 billion population should be fed.
All
and
right.
Therefore, they wouldn't care how you allow yourself to be exploited. This is what I'm cautioning against.
Do you think that most of the cautions that are coming in were being too scary or trying to scare government in the process, if anything like that is possible? As people mention, including Zambia, they say, look, take a look at Zambia. The international airport is being taken over by China for they defaulting in some debt payments.
Well, it's not to scare government. It's to make government more cautious, more meticulous. And I believe that the seriousness with which this government is trying to tackle our relationship with China is such that these cautious commentaries must be the antenna for their relationship with China.
Okay.
And I also believe that we must go in for things that are sustainable. That is to say that a government coming in other than this government would not renege on the promises and change course.
Okay.
We are fond of doing that.
All right.
I remember in 2005 when President Akufo led the African group, 35 African countries, for a relationship with China, the door was open for a lot of things. In fact, the Chinese want the $6 billion project for the Bui Dam. If you go to Namibia, it was just around the same time that also Namibia opened their doors seriously to the Chinese and go and see what they're doing there. But what we're saying is that, any government that comes must continue from where the old government left off and must steer a course that inures to the benefit of this country. More factories from China in this country, I would love to have it.
Okay.
We have had that experience before, but unfortunately we didn't continue. I remember Kwasibote's time. He was very vociferous in our relationship with China to bring in the Chinese.
All right.
And we were producing arrow shirts from Akostombo.
Okay.
The value of arrows, when you are wearing arrow, it's got a name. And with the Chinese having the license to produce arrow, they came to Ghana and were producing from Ghana. And we were exporting from Ghana. What happened?
All right.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That we need sustainability of the projects we are going to have with China. And that is the only way we will benefit from the Chinese.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vladimir Nchidanso, Dean and Director of the Academic Affairs, Ghana Armed Forces Command and Staff College. Thank you very much indeed. Before that, he used to be at Lesia and has been, I think he's been in the Polka department also before. Yeah. Yes, he's been Dean of Students, Dean of, is it at the hall level, what do we call them?
Senior tutor.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Vladimir Nchidanso. And he comes in, continues the caution that almost everybody is giving, but he also, emphasizes that he has seen traits of what is happening as the way government is going about the process as being something that gives hope that we are not going to throw away our birthright as is being suggested. How do you feel when you hear matters of local content has been spoken about? Yeah. When you hear and information from government quarters is that, for example, with the Sino deal, there is 30% minimum local content that must be had in that process. Is that enough for you? Again, Dr. Nchidanso mentions the bauxite is not going to be given to them. We have a Ghana entity that will be set up or has been set up, I don't know, that will deal with it. And then, you know, part of the proceeds is what will be used to pay for what?
That is the question.
The facility. Yeah.
That is the question.
Right.
Look, whether we like it or not, it's a loan. It's a repayment, and for some reasons of this IMF thing, we want to use some legal semantics and bypass it. At the end of the day, when we are reporting, we had a loan, and we won't say we paid with 100 tons of alumina or bauxite. It will be converted and in the books to be cash.
Okay.
Okay, but I was adding on to the caution.
Right.
I said, look, when you look at the international scene now, there's a full-fledged or almost trade war. And we are just on the fringes. And whatever happens there, if we are consumed by it, this whole deal can have or can take a different turn. So as our leaders, our government is getting involved in these arrangements, we should be mindful also of the international implications. You know about Iran, where all of a sudden, even European countries, companies are withdrawing their investments because the big man says, hey, you need to move out. So we have to be very, very cautious in getting involved in these matters. Now, when we are told that we should also bring China to Ghana, it's rightly so. For instance, in this agreement, do we have something like a project on bamboo and its products? You know what it means to job creation? How much do we have to put in that? We should be mindful of the unemployment situation in this country. And the local content issue is key. How we will translate that into jobs for our teeming population of unemployed is also something that we have to look at. But I want to add the issue of we looking out for loans or assistance from outside. If we do an analysis of what we import, even from China, do we have an opportunity for local or import substitution? Can we quantify the cost? Multiply it over, this is for 12 years or so. Can that generate $2 billion for us? So we need to be innovative in the way we approach some of the things so that we don't become colonized, so that our hands are not tied and one day, you said Zambia, the airport. Fortunately, the airport is still in Zambia, so
you can't take it away.
But Dr. Vladimir Nchidanso refers to other countries where he doesn't like what is going on, that the Chinese have completely taken over the economy.
Do you like what is happening?
Angola and Zambia itself, yes, right?
And other mining dominated countries in Africa, largely.
Do we like what is going on in Ghana? The president said we hold China hand in hand because we have what?
We want to go far.
We are not doing that at Swami magazine. The Chinese are there. The Nigerians are there. We are not doing that in, even in Accra. There were several complaints about the fact that
it's the same president who has stopped the illegal mining activities that Chinese have been involved in.
Yes, so you realize that once we are opening our doors, we should also sound the caution. It's not as if we are begging But then we must also ensure that when they come in, they respect our laws, especially the
He
laws.
emphasized that to the Chinese president. And he gave his commitment to that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's in respect of Galamsey.
Yes.
But I'm talking about the labor laws. You see, from where I sit, just yesterday we read something somewhere in Kumasi where somebody was stabbed, if the story is true, by a Chinese person. We shouldn't open our arms too much and let things become a disincentive and enrage our people into certain things that will eventually negate the objective for which we are going to China.
Okay. All right. So we'll take a break at this point. When we return, I'll share your comments, the views that you have shared with us on this matter. And then we shall proceed to the banking matters that never seem to end. We'll be right back.